What's good? It's Woog. Oh boy, this is it. Can you believe that this fight is actually happening? I mean, do you remember just several months ago when they announced Terence Crawford versus David Evanesian, how much that just took the wind out of the sails and how deflating that was? And then we started, getting comfortable with the idea of Errol Spence Jr. instead fighting like Keith Thurman, who, in his heyday was one of the two, best welterweights in the sport. You could argue that at one point he was the best welterweight in the sport. But man, in December of 2022, it looked like, damn, I guess it's not going to happen. And I mean, months later, here we are. It's Errol Spence Jr., 28 wins and 0 losses, defending his WBC, IBF, and WBA welterweight titles against Terence Crawford, 39 wins and 0 losses. And Crawford will be defending his WBO welterweight title. And yes, this is a battle for undisputed, but this is one of those fights that is so important and so big that it overshadows the status of undisputed. This is the most important and best, on paper, the best fight of the era. And the winner of this fight will undoubtedly be ranked the #1 pound for pound fighter in the sport. And, both of these guys, their roads have led to this collision course, which is a little bit interesting because, I've been tracking both of these guys for like most of their entire career. I mean, Spence had a reputation that preceded him, although he didn't, medal in the Olympics or anything like that. He was pretty much a hot prospect with a shiny reputation because of how well he reportedly or supposedly or was rumored to have done in sparring Floyd Mayweather. And I remember when my boy put me up onto, how that sparring supposedly went. I forgot whether, Spence was to have supposedly dropped Mayweather in a sparring session, but, he basically came out of that session with a new and enhanced reputation. So, I was watching him, in the early to mid 2010s. And, I was watching Terence Bud Crawford just before he fought, like Breedis Prescott. And so we're talking like 2012, 2013, but I didn't really see that these guys would be, on these converging roads to one another because Errol Spence Jr. was a big welterweight already, and Terence Crawford was a lightweight. Like I remember in 2014 when they made, Terence Crawford challenging Ricky Burns for his WBO lightweight title. And I remember going into that fight like, ooh, Ricky Burns is pretty tough, but this is going to be a big step up for Terence Crawford. And so, no, I didn't think that it would come down to Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford. I thought that Errol Spence would have left the division years ago. So even as Spence was working up the ranks, for instance, against, Chris Algieri, and when he knocked out Leonard Bundu, Terence Crawford was then at 140. And, the best opponent that he fought there was Victor Postal. I remember going into that fight thinking, ooh, like I know Terence Crawford is good, but we'll see if he's that good because Victor Postal was looking really good after, stopping Lucas Matisse when Lucas Matisse was still a very scary name in the game. And so Terence Crawford was brilliant against Victor Postal, ended up dropping him like twice en route to a unanimous decision win. And it was a few fights prior to that where he had, gotten rocked by Yuriorkis Gamboa and then ended up stopping Gamboa in the 9th round. So, Terence Crawford continued to exceed my expectations because when he was at lightweight, like I knew that he was good. I didn't for one moment think that this guy was generationally good. Whereas with Errol Spence, I thought that he could be a special welterweight. I saw the special in Spence before I saw it with Crawford. Because, when Crawford fought Ricky Burns, Breedis Prescott, those fights went the distance. Even when he fought Ray Beltran, it went the distance. But then he scored 3 knockouts in a row against Thomas Delorme, Thierry Jean, and Hank Lundy. And then he fought Victor Postal. And did you know that decision win over Postal in 2016 is the last time that Terence Crawford has been taken the distance? Everything after that has been a knockout or stoppage. He had 3 more fights at 140, all knockouts or stoppage. And then he went to welterweight and is knocked out or stopped each of his 7 opponents at 147. Although most of these were on top rank where they didn't have the lion's share of the talent in the welterweight division. So they had to be creative with coming up with opponents for Terence Crawford, you know, an aging and over the hill Amir Khan, a pretty good but non-elite Mean Machine Kavyaskis, and over the hill Kell Brook. And I remember being very excited and kind of curious about that fight. And the first two at welterweight were against Jeff Horn and Jose Benavidez Jr. So it wasn't until Terence Crawford's final fight in that top rank contract where PBC let Shawn Porter go over and fight Terence Crawford over there. And that might be Terence Crawford's most impressive performance at 147, because now you're talking Shawn Porter and stopping Shawn Porter, being the first and only person to stop Shawn Porter. So while Terence Crawford was, you know, kind of mapping out his path at 147, we saw what Errol Spence Jr. was doing at welterweight. He was, you know, earning the IBF belt in the UK against Kell Brook, and then defending it successfully, stopping Lamont Peterson, knocking Ocampo out in the early rounds, dominating Mikey Garcia, a very undersized Mikey Garcia. But at the time, there was still a lot of curiosity because Mikey Garcia at that point was looking phenomenal, but we mostly wanted to see Mikey fight Vasily Lomachenko, but he decided to go up multiple weight classes and fight Errol Spence Jr. It did not go well for Mikey Garcia. And then Errol Spence Jr. had the fight against Shawn Porter, where he dropped Porter in the late rounds in a very, very close fight where going into the 11th round, it was anybody's guess who was winning that one. But again, he dropped Shawn Porter late, ended up winning a split decision win over Shawn Porter. And then he had that devastating car accident, which he was lucky to emerge from with his life, let alone a fight career. And then he fights Danny Garcia, beats Garcia via unanimous decision. And then he has a scheduled fight with Manny Pacquiao. And it's like, damn, Errol Spence Jr. is finally going to get a superstar opponent to now elevate his name if he is to beat Manny Pacquiao. This could be that, truly that king-making performance, even though Errol Spence was already in my top 2 pound for pound at that point. Beating Manny Pacquiao just gives you a different level of glow, right? But they had to cancel that fight, or at least have a replacement for Errol Spence, and that replacement was Yordenis Ugas, who then beat Manny Pacquiao via decision. The reason for the pullout was because Errol Spence had a torn retina that he had to get operated on. So this is another career-threatening incident for Errol Spence. And then he returns to the ring and he stops Yordenis Ugas, becoming the first to do that. And so that is Errol Spence's last fight. That was in April of 2022, more than a year ago. And he has since been in another car accident where he, you know, at least he said he damaged and hurt his leg, that his leg was hurt coming out of that accident. So, you know, I'm looking at Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford. And once again, I just want to tip my hat to both fighters for finding a way to get this ultra super fight done. And, you know, I don't care too much about how this does in terms of pay-per-view sales. I mean, yes, I hope it does as many as possible. But even if this doesn't do the same numbers as Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia, make no mistake, this is the most important fight of the era. I cannot stress that enough. But I'm sizing up Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford, and I'm just enthused. I am super excited about this fight. I've been back and forth on this one, like for years now. Like, you know, the whole time, if you were to ask me in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, Errol Spence Jr. or Terence Crawford, because I remember other people mentioning it, but then, you know, Keith Thurman was still, you know, in the mix for me at least. I still wanted to see Keith Thurman return in top form, hopefully, and be able to, you know, see how good he would do against Errol Spence Jr. It wasn't until Terence Crawford started stopping Kell Brook and then stopping Shawn Porter that I'm like, wait a second. And then I started to reevaluate what Spence versus Crawford might look like. Because what I'm seeing is one of the most physically imposing workhorses in Errol Spence Jr. He's got punch volume. He's got ultra good balance. He's got very good punching power. He's got pretty good hand speed, not blinding hand speed, but he's got decent hand speed. I think Terence Crawford might have might have the slightly faster hands, but Terence Crawford to me isn't one of those ultra fast punchers. He's not like Zab Judah, Gary Russell Jr., Roy Jones Jr. type of quick with his hand speed. Like, I don't think he's got hands as fast as Sugar Shane Mosley or Floyd Mayweather, but he's got decent, hand speed. But with Spence versus Crawford, we've got the very physical, who's an underrated sweet scientist. Like Errol Spence Jr. could box his butt off. Like, we saw that against Mikey Garcia. We saw it against Danny Garcia. I mean, we've seen different degrees and different elements of it against different opponents. I mean, the one that kind of built into a slog was him against Sean Porter, where that was clearly a Sean Porter style fight. And Sean Porter's very good at making all of his fights Sean Porter style fights. But aside from that one, we see Errol Spence Jr. kind of having his way against most of his opponents. I mean, again, he stopped Yordenis Ugas after getting rocked in the 5th round, which I will get back to in this video, because it does bother me in terms of his chances at beating Terence Crawford. But in Terence Crawford, I feel like we have one of the most adaptable fighters, if not the most adaptable fighter in the sport. And it's almost become commonplace with Terence Crawford, where he starts the fight orthodox and at some point switches to southpaw, sometimes early, sometimes in the middle rounds. Against Kell Brook, I thought Kell Brook won the first 2 rounds before Terence Crawford switched to southpaw in the 3rd and ended up finishing Kell Brook in the 4th. Like, that's how quickly that adaptation took effect. He caught him with like a lead right hand. It didn't even look like a super sharp or devastating punch, but you see the effect that it had given the timing and given the placement on Kell Brook. Kell Brook went stumbling into the ropes and he was all but done by that point. So when Terence Crawford starts to make his adjustments and starts to really try to hurt you, he's got ways of hurting you pretty quickly, pretty viciously, and then closing the show. Again, nobody at welterweight has gone the distance with Terence Crawford yet. So something's got to give here. Will Errol Spence be able to exercise his brilliant lead hand? Because Errol Spence is a southpaw, so his lead right hand is one of the busiest in all of sports. It's not just used to jab and to right hook. He's using it to probe. He's using it to control distance, control range. He's using it to kind of move your head around or move your glove around. He's doing all kinds of tricky things. He's kind of touching you with that lead hand while he's adjusting his feet to set up his highly leveraged power punches. Sometimes that left hand could come to the body, sometimes it could come up top, but it's usually set up and predicated on the activity of that lead hand. Now, if he has that lead hand out there, what's Terence Crawford gonna do about it? Because one thing that's always interested me in this matchup is that Terence Crawford has the longer reach. It's 72 inches for Errol Spence, even though he's the slightly taller fighter, to 74 inches for Terence Crawford. So it's Crawford who on paper has had the longer reach. So is Errol Spence going to be able to probe with that lead hand and work that lead hand against Terence Crawford? He also uses it to kind of walk his opponents down. Watch Errol Spence Jr. versus Lamont Peterson. Like, Spence didn't lose 1 round of that fight and he just broke Peterson down. That's what he does. He just wears you the hell out, sometimes quickly and finishes you in the early rounds. Sometimes it takes a few rounds, but he's breaking you down steadily and kind of taking your soul and your body out of the fight. So will Spence be able to exercise that lead hand without Terence Crawford being able to throw something over that or on top of that? I tend to think that Errol Spence is going to have a little more difficulty exercising that control with the right lead hand against Crawford than he did against, the relatively short-armed Danny Garcia or even shorter-armed Mikey Garcia. You know what I mean? Like, look, if you watch the early rounds with Kell Brook against Errol Spence Jr., Brook had the faster hands, and so he was able to kind of take off on Errol Spence Jr. It wasn't until, the 3rd, 4th, and then the 5th round where you started to see Errol Spence kind of seize more control over the fight and start, putting more of a beating on Kell Brook. And then you started seeing Brook slowing down by the late rounds, got stopped in the 11th round. That's where Spence first captured his first share of that welterweight title. It was the IBF belt. So I'm wondering what style of fight Errol Spence Jr. is gonna take against Terence Crawford. Sometimes it takes Crawford a while to get cooking. Sometimes it takes Spence a while to get cooking. But is Spence gonna fight a front foot heavy fight or a back foot heavy fight? I tend to think that his best chance is to try to box him and fight him in the way that he fought Mikey Garcia. It's just that, again, Terence Crawford's reach is so far beyond Mikey Garcia's reach. In fact, when Terence Crawford was still on the come up, one of the things that they used to say when they were kind of hyping Crawford's name up was that he beat Mikey Garcia and Danny Garcia in the amateurs. I remember that used to be one of his calling cards. He beat Mikey Garcia because, again, Mikey Garcia through most of his career was undefeated. So I don't think that I think that Spence should try to fight a measured fight in the way that he fought against Mikey Garcia. I just don't know if he could do so with the same relaxation that he did against Mikey Garcia, because at any point, Terence Crawford, even if he's down on the scorecards, even if he's given up a few rounds, could change the fight with one punch at any moment. That's why my opinion on this fight has kind of changed in recent months, in recent years. Again, I was always Team Spence, so to speak. And, I'll be forthcoming. I think that look, this is one of those fights where I kind of don't want to see either of these guys lose. I have so much respect and admiration for both of these guys. And I want to be clear, there have been fights from both of these guys where I've pulled for their opponents. I've pulled against Errol Spence in certain fights. I've pulled against Terence Crawford in certain fights. But with this matchup, I don't want to see anybody's O go. And this is such a competitive matchup on paper. Like, we don't know how this thing's going to play out, but I tend to think that both of these guys are gonna take a lot of damage here, and that part is just an unfortunate reality of the game. But if Errol Spence Jr. tries to fight a measured fight against Terence Crawford, I think that he could win some rounds that way. But the thing with Spence is, once he starts cooking, you start seeing him go to the body with the left hand and start changing up the variety of shots that he's throwing with that backhand, with that left hand. That type of activity just opens the door for more opportunities for Terence Crawford to do what he does best, and that is to make those quick reads and get engaged in those 50-50 combinations, that Russian roulette, those rock, paper, scissors moments where Terence Crawford shines. Errol Spence has to be very careful, especially when you consider how he looked in that moment of the 5th round when he got his mouthpiece knocked out against Yordenis Ugas. Like, I saw that All Access on Showtime where Errol Spence Jr. basically described it and said, hey, I thought that my partials, like some of his fixed teeth, he thought that those were knocked out, and he was scared of being embarrassed, so he was looking for his teeth. That's what he says he was doing, and he says that he wasn't like hurt in that moment, even though when he basically turned his back to Ugas and then got drilled again into the ropes, he says he wasn't hurt. I'm still not 100% convinced of that. And, I've heard online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer say that he suspects that it might have had something to do with Spence's surgically repaired eye. You know what I mean? So whether you're talking about his partials, his mouth, right, or his eye, I'm just wondering if any of these past injuries are going to play into Errol Spence's psychology. I know he's a warrior. I know he's a dog. Like, you don't have to tell me that. I've seen his career. I've seen how gritty he could get. I mean, people talk about, Terence Crawford's mean streak. I think Errol Spence has just about as nasty a mean streak. Now, he doesn't engage in the same way that Terence Crawford does. Like, when Crawford gets hit, he tends to want to open up and immediately hurt you back. Like, that's just his temperament. Errol Spence does some of the same things, but not with the same, dare I say, recklessness as Terence Crawford. Even though when Terence Crawford starts to go there, he usually gets the better of it. And again, it's because he's able to make those millisecond reads. So I think that one of a couple things is going to play out here. Either Errol Spence Jr. is able to walk Terence Crawford down. Like, that was my dad's pick. My dad is taking Errol Spence Jr. via decision by walking him down and kind of beating up on him. My cousin, whose boxing opinion I highly respect, you might see him if you join any of our live chats, Benjamin Tucker, he is going with Errol Spence Jr. My brother, on the other hand, he's going with Terence Crawford. And again, I've been so back and forth on this one, but I think that either Errol Spence Jr. is able to beat up on and walk down Terence Crawford, or he gets involved in one too many of those 50-50 exchanges where, again, it's rock, paper, scissors. You throw this, I throw this. I just have so much respect for Terence Crawford's ability to operate in those moments where he just hits you with something kind of wild, but very calculated that you just don't see. We saw him do it with Mean Machine, Kell Brook, Sean Porter in his stoppage win over Sean Porter, or when he devastated Avanesian with that hook uppercut combo. I mean, come on, a right hook, left uppercut combo. I just think that, Errol Spence is a good defensive fighter, but he does get hit. And the margin for error, I just feel moment by moment, is so slim versus Terence Crawford. Like, Errol Spence will stop you, but I don't feel like it's the same moment by moment danger against Errol Spence in the same way that it is with Terence Crawford. So I could see Errol Spence being up on the scorecards through 6 rounds, like 4 rounds to 2, or, through 8 rounds, maybe 5 rounds to 3. And then just hitting a moment where in one exchange, he gets rocked with something in, mid exchange as Crawford starts to open up. And then we see Spence get a little bit wobbly legged. I think that I'm leaning that scenario. But I mean, can you imagine if the opposite, if Spence is able to walk down and you start to see Terence Crawford showing the wear and tear? I mean, Crawford's 35 years old. He turns 36 in September. Imagine if we see Terence Crawford start to get beaten up to where we see him start to capitulate and back up, maybe into the ropes, and we see Errol Spence start to do what he does best. And imagine if we see Spence stop Terence Crawford, man down. Boy, wouldn't that be something. But I just can't get away from the visual of Errol Spence having some success, more success than Crawford in the early, even to middle rounds, but then getting rocked. And once he gets rocked, Terence Crawford starting to open up and drop Errol Spence Jr. But damn, I have so much respect for Errol Spence's ability to survive and his durability. But I don't know, like, what do you go with in terms of who's got more chinks in the armor? Is it Terence Crawford due to his age, or is it Errol Spence Jr. due to having arguably more wear and tear, whether you're talking about the detached retina, whether you're talking about the car accident? Like, a lot of people want to dismiss that like he's as good as new, like that doesn't have anything or doesn't play in any way in the future of Errol Spence's career. I'm like, just because we saw him come back and have that spectacular, maybe not spectacular, but very impressive decision win over Danny Garcia, I'm like, we don't know what the tissue damage was, like we don't know how these injuries age over time. So I don't know that Errol Spence is still 100%. And I don't know if Terence Crawford at 35 is still 100%. But I just think that despite what I envision to be early to middle round success for Errol Spence Jr., that he does get caught, dropped. Damn, does he get stopped? Does he get stopped by Terence Crawford? I mean, damn, like, that's why this one is so difficult to go with. I mean, you know what's crazy? When I did a live chat and when I did a short video, like one of those 1-minute videos on Spence Crawford, I was looking at your guys' comments and it was pretty split. But in that split, each individual comment has so much certainty. Like, it might have been 50-50 in your guys' opinion, but you guys were like, Terence Crawford's going to stop in middle rounds. Take that to the bank, basically. Errol Spence Jr., he's going to show that there's levels to this, and he's going to, beat up on and walk down Terence Crawford. Like, Terence Crawford, basically, they're making a lot out of Terence Crawford's, his welterweight schedule, fight over fight, who he fought and where they were in their career. And they think that Errol Spence is just super unlike anything Terence Crawford has encountered, which, I wouldn't argue with. I think that both of these guys, respectively, for each other, are unlike anything that each other has countered. That's why it's also so difficult to pick fights out of their histories to really look at and use that as your analysis in what to expect in this fight with the other than to say, as much as I'm making over Terence Crawford's ability to stop Spence, it's Crawford who we've seen in more shaky leg situations, like against Yorkis Gamboa or against Mean Machine Kavaliauskas. I mean, we've seen Mean Machine hurt Terence Crawford, and we've seen Mean Machine hurt Virgil Ortiz Jr. But yeah, we've seen Terence Crawford get beaten up and get hurt, visibly, observably hurt. But then we see how he then responds to that. I know that Errol Spence Jr. super early in his career got rocked and jelly-legged at a point, but since that, we haven't really seen, unless you want to consider that Ugas moment for Errol Spence, we haven't really seen Errol Spence get jelly-legged where it's like, oh, is he going down? Did he just go down? Like, we haven't seen that with Spence. So that's also why it's difficult to envision him getting dropped by Terence Crawford. But I mean, I gotta take a pick here. I mean, wouldn't it be something if this ends up being a draw? But yeah, I'm gonna go with, again, 80% of the time, if you would have asked me, I would have said Errol Spence Jr., but I'm going Terence Crawford, and I'm going Terence Crawford via stoppage. I just think that there might be some invisible impact that the wear and tear has had on Errol Spence Jr. that we're just not seeing. And by the way, the trainers here, Derek James and Bomac, like, their reputations are pretty phenomenal as well. And if Derek James's fighters, Jermell Charlo against Canelo and Errol Spence against Terence Crawford, and then hell, Anthony Joshua against Dillian White, if he goes 3 for 3 in those fights, I mean, we just saw his other fighter, or one of his other fighters, he also now trains Ryan Garcia, but we just saw Frank Martin escape by the skin of his teeth in his last fight, right? But if Derek James is able to win more than 50% of these like super fights, that's arguably one of the best years a trainer has ever had, especially if 2 of those wins can be Errol Spence Jr. and then Jermell Charlo beating Canelo Alvarez. But yeah, I'm going Terence Crawford via stoppage. I'm thinking 9th or 10th round stoppage. But you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if this one goes the distance either, just given these guys' pedigree. But man, if Errol Spence stops Terence Crawford, again, I've got to pick somebody, and I'm going Terence Crawford via stoppage. I'm going to go with the idea that there are going to be a lot of violent exchanges between these two, and Errol Spence won't be able to keep this fight at a simmering pace where it's just 1-2 punches at a time, because usually Errol Spence is so in control that he's able to control and dictate when the meaningful exchanges happen. And usually when he's doing that, he again is probing with the right and then just blasting you with that left hand, either to the body or up top, or using his good underrated footwork to then pivot to the other side and then throw that right hook to the body or up top. Look at how he did that damage against Yordenis Ugas. It might have looked simple and looked basic, but no, other people can't do that. It was very sophisticated. And when you couple that sophistication with Spence's physicality, boy, he just wreaks havoc. It's absolute hell for his opponents. But yeah, I just think that I think that in the middle and late rounds, unless he's truly putting an increased beating on Terence Crawford, I just think that the bullets are going to fly in too many exchanges to where Terence Crawford is going to be able to open up and start hitting Spence with a couple shots that he doesn't see, and one of those is going to give Errol Spence a shaky leg, and that will spell the beginning of the end for Spence in that fight. Or it could also be a case where he maybe drops Spence, but Spence recovers, and then it goes the 12-round distance. And then you would think that if this goes the distance, then Spence should have the higher likelihood of winning the decision. Now, it complicates matters if Crawford drops Spence, but Spence wins, or at least seemingly wins, majority of the rounds. But I'm gonna go with Crawford via stoppage here. This one was difficult, can you tell? But I'm going Crawford via stoppage, 9th or 10th round, and that's my pick. That's my pick. And it's crazy. I think that I'm pulling for Errol Spence in this one. I think I'm pulling for Spence, but I'm picking Crawford. But please let me know your thoughts on, again, the most important fight of the year. I'm elated. I just can't wait to celebrate this. I'm going to do a live chat, by the way. Tune in for that. I'm going to do a live chat sometime early in the week, like either Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm going to do a live chat, and it's going to be on all things Spence Crawford. We're going to talk just Spence Crawford in that one. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.